They say hospitals are full of ghosts, but I never believed them until I found a room that wasn't on the map. I've mopped these sterile halls for 5 years, knowing every crack in the tile and every flickering fluorescent light bulb by heart. But tonight, at 3 a.m., I noticed a door marked Room 404 in a wing closed off decades ago. Looking up at the rusted hinges, I felt a freezing draft seeping through the frame, whispering my name in the dark. I stared down at my soapy water, watching the reflection of the exit sign warp in the suds. My hand trembled as I reached out and turned the cold brass handle, half hoping it would be locked tight forever. I stepped inside, leaving the familiar hum of the hospital corridor behind me as the door clicked shut with heavy finality. Standing in the shadows, I waited for my eyes to adjust, the silence in the room pressing hard against my ears. My eyes widened. The room wasn't dusty or abandoned at all, it was pristine, sterile, and glowing with pale blue light. A state-of-the-art medical suite stood hidden in the dark, humming with expensive machinery that shouldn't exist in this old wing. Looking over the sleek heart rate monitor, I watched a green line flatline, yet a soft, rhythmic pulsing sound continued. I looked up at an IV bag dripping a thick, pitch-black liquid down a tube, feeding into the quiet figure bedded below. From above, the patient looked perfectly still, their entire body enveloped in pale, clean sheets like a forgotten museum exhibit. I reached out, my fingers hovering inches above the synthetic, cold fabric of the blanket, hesitating to disturb the deep peace. I crept closer to the head of the bed, my footsteps completely silent against the strangely pristine, polished white floor tile. The silhouette of the patient's profile was sharp and motionless, giving no sign of breath, no rise or fall of life. My eyes strained in the dim blue glow as I searched for any chart or nameplate hanging near the bedside. I scanned the wide, silent room, half expecting a doctor to jump out and catch me trespassing in this forbidden sector. Looking down at the digital clipboard, there was no patient name, just a glowing barcode and the words, Subject 0. I looked up at the ceiling vent, listening to the mechanical hum that felt more like a low, vibrating growl. Overhead, I peered closer at the patient's face, entirely wrapped in sterile white bandages, leaving only a mouth exposed. I reached down and peeled back the edge of the sheet to check the wristband, hoping for some real answers. I backed away slowly toward the humming computer terminal in the corner, my heart hammering wildly against my ribs. My outline cast a long shadow across the room as I began frantically tapping keys, bypass screens flashing to life. My eyes locked onto the screen as a file loaded, the blue light reflecting off my pupils in frozen horror. The monitor displayed an employee file, complete with a photograph of a familiar custodian in a faded blue uniform. I stared over my own shoulder at my own face on the screen, labeled, deceased. Incident date, 10 years ago today. I looked up at the mirror on the wall, but the glass showed only an empty room behind me. Looking down at my boots, I realized I wasn't leaving any wet mop tracks on the dusty floor behind me. I stared at my hand as I pressed it against the cold metal bed frame, watching my fingers sink slightly through. Panic seized me as I stumbled backward away from the desk, my lungs gasping for air I didn't need. I bolted toward the exit, my shadow stretching thin and distorted under the flickering, harsh lights of the hallway. My eyes darted around in absolute terror as the realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I stood in the vast, empty corridor, the silence screaming back at me, realizing I was entirely alone here. I looked back through the glass window of room 404, only to see the bed was now completely empty. I looked up at the security camera, its red light blinking slowly, recording a ghost walking through empty halls. Looking down, I saw my spilled mop bucket, the water completely dry, as if it had been spilled years ago. My hands shook as I pulled my old plastic ID badge from my pocket, the printed date faded to dust. I ran to the main entrance doors, throwing my weight against them, but they were chained and locked from outside. Staring into the dark void beyond the glass, I have to ask, am I the one cleaning this empty hospital, or am I the patient who shouldn't exist? Tell me in the comments.